focus on the war. And this is where we're stuck. We're not talking about the regime change now. We're talking about who controls the Strait of Hormuz. And this is where Iranians are changing the narrative somehow. And Iran or Trump is shifting his benchmark. The way he started the war, now we don't know what's his end game. We don't know what he wants. And this is shifting, and both sides, they are shifting their narrative. But I think, yes, Trump wants to keep it open, even if the Chinese did so, to avoid confrontation that allows him to continue pressure on the Iranian regime.
Yeah, and we have to remind our viewers that there are midterm elections in November in the United States. There's a lot of political pressure and a lot of public opposition to this war in Iran among American voters. So if he's changing his benchmark or moving the goalposts, back to use an American analogy, what do you think it is now? Because at the start, we heard from various officials saying it was regime change and then denying that. Now the economic concerns are creeping up. So what do you think Washington would settle for?
You're right. The election is coming soon, but there's not enough big domestic pressure on him to shift now. Mm-hmm. We saw the soldiers dying. We saw some signals, but we didn't see a big movement. Yet it might come in the next few weeks. He's trying to avoid this. So yeah, before he wanted for them to do on the ballistic missile, on the nuclear, on the Iran regional role. Now he's not talking about conditions. He was talking about full surrender. The last statement of the new leader, Khamenei, basically extended the war a few weeks because he said, we're not going to stop on the Hormuz, we're going to stop the war. So Trump said this week going to be tough for the Iranians. They're going to try to bomb more. So now it's about how did you find victory? It's about the impression you gave, the psychological war. I think a nuclear deal now, I don't think the Iranians will give up the ballistic missile at this point after what they did. I think on the regional role and on the nuclear, I think they'll be more ready to talk. But again, it all depends on the new leader is not Khamenei. He's much more radical. If he compromises now, it will be perceived as surrender. They are not ready to talk to the Americans, so they might have creative solution to talk through IAEA or third party, because it's difficult to imagine direct negotiation after the killing of Khamenei now.
All right, Joe, thank you very much. Joe Macaron, geopolitical analyst. Thank you.
Thank you.
About the Trump administration's credibility and influence in this conflict?
Well, I would say that they have torched a good deal of what they had going in. And of course, since he came to office in 2017, President Trump has been forthrightly hostile to many traditional U.S. allies. And I think now that he's reaping the whirlwind, you have Japan, South Korea, France, the U.K., all at best saying that they are going to consider possibly sending some ships. That is really a blow to the Trump administration's belief that America is naturally a leader.
Do you think Trump has lost control of this war, Salman?
Yes, it's the wrong war at the wrong moment, without the right planning, and it's illegal. There is no mandate for it. And it shows, frankly, the limits of U.S. power now, not just in this region, but more broadly on the global arena.
We'll talk about the future of the U.S. power in this region in a minute, but I wanted to ask you first about the Iranians both. The calculations from the Iranians right now seems to be not who has a bigger bomb or bigger munitions, but who has the higher threshold for pain. Who do you think that is right now? Is it Iran who has the upper hand in the conflict at this stage, 3 weeks in?
Well, it has a higher threshold for pain. The Iranian regime is fighting an existential battle, which is now becoming a nationalist struggle. So for sure, and you see how Americans who have not really supporting this are measuring the pain of every single soldier that is hurt or killed. So for sure, that's what the Iranians think. And they've put together a strategy of asymmetrical warfare, whereby which even if their military and conventional military has been severely degraded, they're still able to fight on and create the kind of pressure that they are right now.
Do you agree with that? Do you think, Paul, that Iran has the upper hand right now? Or are they also starting to budge a little bit in terms of negotiating, perhaps?
I think Iran has demonstrated a high threshold for pain. I mean, on day one, their government was decapitated. Since then, Tehran has been turned into a hellscape. But they also have to continue to demonstrate the power to hurt the GCC, Western Europe, the United States, and Israel. So far, we are not far enough into this conflict to say that Iran can do that. But let's be frank, the indications are that as long as they can keep the Strait of Hormuz closed, they will be able to deal a great amount of pain.
Yeah. The GCC now, Salman, Iran's strategy right now seems to be to convince the GCC countries that the U.S. is not there to protect them, right? Do you think it's working, this strategy? Are the GCC countries now reconsidering their position vis-à-vis the U.S.?
Well, for sure, we see that now in terms of the simple fact is that the U.S. has not been able to protect the GCC states. And in fact, there is talk and very much how the U.S. has focused on trying to protect Israel and the kind of missiles, salvos, which are directed more towards Israel than the GCC states. That's not to say that the GCC is not mad with Iran for what they've done. And we saw that with the UN action last week as well. And the Iranians have to be very careful, too. This is why I believe Foreign Minister Agrahi has been trying to reset some of that conversation.
But how united or divided are the GCC countries right now in their response, not just towards Iran, but also towards the US? Are they on the same page?
Well, they're talking to each other, for sure. They have to know that if they're not more united, and I think this is something which is still work in progress, they're probably going to face more threats and maybe even another round, because I don't see this war necessarily ending decisively. So the question is then what are they able to do? And we see that voices like Prince Turki in Saudi Arabia or Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim here in Doha are suggesting things like more collective alliances, like a Gulf alliance of sorts.
Paul, your thoughts about that? Are we likely to see a reshuffling of regional alliances as a result of this conflict, and perhaps the GCC pulling together more effectively now than they have in the past?
Well, I think that having a common threat is a great foundation for common approaches to security. The GCC itself was founded in the shadow of the Iranian Revolution, which gave the organization a good deal of its impetus. There's going to be a lot of challenges, though, because
but what's their biggest common threat right now, you think? Is it Israel, U.S., or is it Iran?
Israel is a spoiler. The United States has been a bit of a rogue actor, but Iran is always going to be here. And what this conflict has demonstrated is that Iran has a tremendous amount of leverage over the GCC, which is why I think you will see additional players, including the United States, become more enmeshed in the security architecture here, because this region is key to global prosperity. Do
you think they all agree on what the biggest common threat is right now, the GCC countries? Because, yeah, go ahead.
I think it's the Israelis, actually.
Okay.
The Israelis were the ones who started this war of choice, and Netanyahu managed to push Trump over the edge in that respect. Iran, as Paul has said, is a neighbor that they have to deal with. Now, how they organize themselves, I think, is already showing what they've managed to do in order to protect themselves. I think is actually giving them a little bit of confidence, a fair amount of confidence, because they have taken a huge onslaught. I think we should not also forget the Europeans. I know the Europeans are often maligned as being weak and irrelevant, but in fact, there are European pilots, there are British pilots flying side by side with Qatari pilots shooting down missiles. So there is a stage here for a more collective security, a NATO-style security, which is defensive in nature, so it's not necessarily threatening Iran, but which involves other states. The United States will, of course, play a role in that, but it won't necessarily be the predominant role.
Paul, we've heard from Foreign Minister Arakchi, who's doing the rounds on U.S. media this Sunday, saying no talks for now. President Trump also indicating that he's not interested in talking to the Iranians. Do you see any realistic off-ramp diplomatically, a diplomatic path that could emerge in the coming days, or is that still out of the question?
The coming days, no, but I will say that, standard negotiating, you would never say that you're looking for an off-ramp first. Anything is going to be very quiet until we hear something that breaks through. I know that there's a lot of people who are quietly optimistic that something might come, but I think that publicly we will continue to see something that looks very much like this conflict right up until the end.
Finally, Salman, are you optimistic that there could be something diplomatically happening behind the scenes, or are we in for escalation for the long run?
You started with the Strait of Hormuz. That's ground zero. Nobody can take the pain of this being choked for too much longer. And if the Houthis also enter with the Bab el-Mandeb Strait on
which they haven't done so,
which they haven't, but they're indicating they could, we're really in a catastrophe. Look, I think there is a possibility of a grand international coalition, which is the Europeans, others allied with the Gulf states, which are pushing for ending this conflict. And I think that is the way to go. And if they don't, yes, this thing is going to go more and more out of hand.
Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us on Al Jazeera. Very good to get your insight on this. Paul Musgrave from Georgetown University in Qatar and Salman Sheikh from the Sheikh Group. Thank you for joining us. Well, meanwhile, Israel is launching aerial attacks across Lebanon while it builds up military presence in the south of Lebanon. Airstrikes on Sunday afternoon targeted 2 towns in the Bekaa region and Qiyam in southern Lebanon. Earlier attacks targeted the capital Beirut's southern suburb. Israel says it's targeting locations being used by Hezbollah. The area has been under a daily attack since early March. Entire buildings have collapsed, blocking roads and crushing cars.